Okay, ladies and gentlemen, more than 100 people are not with us, and they're not with us because flights have been cancelled all over Europe. On average, more than 50% of flights in Europe have been cancelled, and the price of others has been jacked up by a factor of 2 and 3. So more than 100 people are not here, luckily. There's no room. But that led me to believe that, being an Israeli, the Iran war is a conspiracy against this seminar. I'm pretty convinced of that, and no one can convince me otherwise. And if you try, you're anti-Semitic. All right, I'm glad we got that out of the way. Now, I need formally to thank the Commonwealth Institute in Cambridge, United Kingdom. They are one of the sponsors of the event. And the other sponsor is the Vaknin-Rangelovska Foundation, whose two founders are shockingly Sam Vaknin and Lydia Rangelovska. I mean, may come as a shock to you. And these two teamed up together, and they are the ones who are actually financing the event and sponsoring it and so on and so forth. So I need and want to thank them. Down there is Jakov. Jakov has multiple camera disorder, as you can see, but we're working on it. And at this stage, he is our cameraman. He's a very good cameraman. I've worked with him quite a few times, so I'm happy to have him. And next to him is Lubin, who is a sound man, among many other things. And so together they're going to record this seminar for posterity and beyond. I mean, posterity is the minimum for a narcissist, as you know, so, and beyond. So, and finally, I would like to thank my lovely wife, Lydia Rangelovska, and I'm going to do that by quoting a story from the Babylonian Talmud. In the Babylonian Talmud, there's a story about Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva studied for 24 years with another rabbi, and then he returned to his hometown with 24,000 disciples. It was a big seminar. And he returned to his hometown with these disciples, and there was this woman who rushed towards him. And she was badly dressed, no makeup, and so on. Not to say that my wife is like this. And then his students started to harass her. They said to her, do you know who this man is? Stay away. And they wanted to beat her up. They became aggressive and wanted to beat her up. And then he said something that I want to say to my wife and to all of you. He said, whatever is mine and whatever is yours is hers. My wife is the one who opened the first website, history, the first website for narcissistic abuse in 1997. My wife was the first to publish a book about narcissistic abuse in 1999. So she is the mother of the field, actually. And had it been up to me, none of you would be here, and I would not be here. She is the engine. Thank you. Don't overdo it because I may get envious. I mean, you know. Right. So now, with us is Mark Thomas Baer. He's the author of the MPIT theory and the ASR theory. I will mention him a bit later because he's going to give us a presentation. Once I finish my part for today, he's going to have 1 hour with you, and he's going to present his work and take questions from the audience. I find Mark's work to be the natural extension of everything that's come before, on the one hand, and a major augmentation towards, effectively, a theory of everything in psychology. I'm not quite sure that even he appreciates where he's going, but I think he's going to end up with a theory of everything. He started with narcissism and narcissistic abuse. It's a very narrow field. But then he expanded it with new insights, new constructs, new ideas, and then it led him inexorably, in my view, towards a much more comprehensive theory. He will, I'm sure, he can do the talking. Now, online, I have placed a booklet, 150 pages long booklet. I call it a booklet because all my books are 700 pages and 2,400 pages and this kind of thing. So there's a booklet online, and the booklet includes everything I'm going to say in this seminar, plus very substantial excerpts from my new book, The World of the Narcissist. So you can download it, it's free of charge, and you will find additional supporting texts, plus everything I'm about to tell you. Now that you know that, you have an excellent reason not to return tomorrow, because, you have everything online. But it would make me very sad, which I'm sure you don't want to do. Okay, so that's a deep dive text online. Now, where can you find this text? This is Ohrid agenda, Ohrid, like the city, agenda. So this is the booklet, and as I said, it includes also substantial portions of my new book, The World of the Narcissist, which is a lot deeper than Malignant Self-Love, in my view, and represents my latest work. Whereas Malignant Self-Love, the 10th edition is 2015, The World of the Narcissist, the latest edition is, if my memory doesn't fail me, 2024 or 2025. So anyhow, you can download it from here. Now, the structure of the seminar. So initially in every seminar there's a portion, some time dedicated to administration, logistics, and so on. So I'm sorry, we have to go through all this. The ground rules are the rules that grind you. So the ground rules are, I'm going to give a lecture, then there's a break. So the lectures are 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock, then 12:30 to 2 o'clock, and then 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock. So between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock you have time to have lunch or socialize or both or whatever. 2 to 3. Prior to that, there are going to be short breaks for coffee or, absconding with the seminar or whatever. I will announce them. There are 10-minute breaks, 15-minute breaks. Why don't you think about it this way? 10 to 2, 3 to 5. Okay? With minor breaks interspersed in between. Now, appearances to the contrary notwithstanding, I am human. That means that I need my breaks. I'm going to be talking for an average of 8 hours a day, including your questions and answers, and I would willingly and gladly exceed the 8 hours because I love the sound of my voice. So that's a lot for a single individual. When I was younger, I did much more. I gave an 8-day seminar in Romania, 2022. Each day was 16 hours. 8 days, one after the other. I am incapable of doing this today. Absolutely not. So I need my rest, I need my break. My voice does, actually. I will not be available to answer questions during the breaks. You have questions, there's a question and answer session at the end of each lecture. Please respect this and don't place me in an unpleasant situation, or actually pleasant situation, where I have to reject you. Okay? I'm very self-effacing and self-deprecating, and I like to joke about myself, and better for you to laugh, yeah? Or else. I will not go into details. Now, questions and answers. I'm going to question all your answers. So you ask questions, I will respond, and I'll try to give you a different point of view. I'm very fond of using $10 words because it makes me look impressive and authoritative. So I'm using $10 words a lot. And I also have a very thick accent, which sounds, I hope, like Sigmund Freud. I hope. And so if you put the two together, you are probably going to grasp or understand something like 20 to 30% of what I'm saying. And I'm being optimistic. Feel free to ask me, what did you just say? Could you repeat? Could you clarify? And then I'm going to use $11 words with the same thick accent. I promise you. Okay? No, seriously. Feel free to ask. I will not be insulted. I will not be humiliated. You will pay the price. We'll deal with it later. Okay. What else is there? A few no-nos. A few things to not do. The first thing is, do not fall asleep during the seminar. I know that many of you are using my videos as a method to combat insomnia. And I'm told that in this way they're a major success, which is the harbinger of a second career, I guess. But please don't fall asleep during the seminar. It may induce me to fall asleep as well. Second thing is, please do not inspect or touch my hair, okay? Because on average, 70% of the comments under my videos have to do with my hair. How wavy it is, the contours, how beautiful it is. It's gray, it's half tone, it's pepper. I'm a wolf, what's it called? Old wolf, no, how it's called this? Fox, silver fox. I'm a silver fox, and so on and so forth. Okay, I get it. My hair is outstanding. It's the only outstanding thing in my anatomy, unfortunately. So, but please don't touch it, inspect it, pull it. It's not a wig, I promise. No need to pull it. And so these are the two no-nos. Yes.
Works.
It's not a wig, I swear. Now, during the seminar, we're going to use the N word. N word is not what you're thinking, it's narcissist. So we're going to use the N word a lot. Don't go politically correct on me. Okay. Sometimes I'm going to come to the seminar wearing an overcoat. I'm going to take the overcoat off. But that is the extent to which I'm going to undress. Don't get your hopes too high. Okay? What else do I need to? Yes, crucial. Do not develop the new mental health condition, which is about to enter the DSM-7. Do not develop emotional seat attachment disorder. Emotional seat attachment disorder is when you get attached to your seat emotionally. And if someone sits, someone occupies it, you lose it. And then they lose it. And we have bloodshed and so on. I feel comfortable in such circumstances. I'm from the Middle East, but still, you know. Your seats are like the narcissist. Here today, gone tomorrow. Try to reconceive of your seats as ephemeral. Okay. 10 o'clock, I said, recordings. You are allowed to record the seminar audio only, not video. But audio, I have no problem with that. You can audio record the seminar. Let's see if there's anything else. I want to give you some hope before I start, and I'm about to start. I want to give you some hope. Alfred Adler, who was a very famous psychologist, he died while giving a lecture. Fritz Perls died while giving a seminar. So there's hope. The seminar might be a lot shorter than you think. You know, don't lose hope. I'm 65. It might well happen, you know. Okay. Let us commence. Activia, cabbage, Olive, oh, oops, that's Lydia's shopping list. I'm sorry. Terribly sorry. They have this thing here called sarma. Any of you knows what sarma is? Sarma is these are vine leaves with the rice and ground meat. And
Or cabbage.
or cabbage.
Or sour cabbage.
Or cabbage. So this shopping list was, leading inexorably towards a sarma future. Okay. Today we are going to discuss in this seminar, we're going to discuss the life cycle of the narcissist. Now, normally, life cycle is a term borrowed from entomology. Insects have life cycles, as you all know. But the narcissist equally does have a life cycle. And I've isolated three stages or three phases. One, when the narcissist is a child, so interactions with parents. The next phase is interpersonal relationships with emphasis on intimate relationships. And especially romantic relationships. That's the second phase. And the third phase is when the narcissist becomes a father or a mother and interaction with their own offspring or children. Now, of course, there are numerous other types of interpersonal relationships. There's the narcissist may have what he considers to be friends, or good friends even. The narcissist may have a job, and then he has colleagues and co-workers and bosses. But I'm going to limit myself to these three areas because it is within these three areas that the narcissistic pathology becomes most evident, that the contours of the narcissistic pathology are most demarcated and delineated. In other words, if you were to scan these three phases in the narcissist's life, you end up knowing more or less everything there is to know about the narcissist. Now, there's a constellation or cluster of traits and behaviors which are common to all three. These traits and behaviors appear when the narcissist is a child, when the narcissist is a spouse or an intimate partner, and when the narcissist is a parent. So we're going to start with these. These are the common denominators. And then there are traits and behaviors that are unique to each and every situation and do not make an appearance in the others. So this is the structure of the seminar. And today we start with the common denominators. How does the narcissist comport himself or herself in all three situations? And actually in all types of relationships. I'm going to use he. I'm going to use the male gender pronoun, pronouns actually, because this is a literary convention. I'm kidding you not. In good literature, we use the male gender pronoun. It's very chauvinistic, but it's very effective. And so when I say he, I mean also she. Half of all narcissists nowadays are women. Half of all people diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder nowadays are women. This did not used to be the case in the 1980s, where 75% of people diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder were men. There was the explanation is that either there was a gender bias, because men are ambitious, men are driven, men sometimes are ruthless, and these are also the qualities of the narcissist. So maybe it was easy to conflate masculinity with narcissism. That's one explanation. But a much more likely explanation, which emanates from the work of Lisa Wade and many others, is that women have become masculine. And so the more masculine women become, the more likely they are to develop masculine disorders, such as narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, including psychopathy. Whereas in the 1970s, when Robert Hare was at its apex, and Robert Hare was conducting his seminal work in prisons with psychopaths, at that time, 10 to 12% of psychopaths were women. Today, the number is 35%, and growing, and growing. And so I'm going to use he. At all times, bear in mind that it's a he or she. I just don't want to say all the time he or she, because it's an impediment. That's the police finally.
I'm coming. I'm so sorry. Can it be like that? What? Okay. No, please.
We have to go through a few pretty boring observations. Like everything in life, there's a cost to pay, and then I believe we will reach the promised land of interesting insights, or insights which would kind of make you jumpy, insights which are counterintuitive, and to my mind at least, thrilling. But before we go there, we need to do a bit of learning, a bit of rote learning, and so on. And so that's the boring part. But bear with me. I mentioned gender, okay? And I'm going now to deal with a series of questions which vex the community of scholars when it comes to pathological narcissism, and also have provoked huge debates online between what I call self-styled experts. So we start with the question of whether narcissism, pathological narcissism, yes, before we proceed. When I say narcissism, I mean pathological narcissism. I never mean healthy narcissism. I mean secondary narcissism. I never mean primary narcissism. We'll come to it a bit later. Narcissism is a good thing. It's a very good thing. Without narcissism, you will not have self-esteem, you will not have self-confidence, you will not have an image of yourself or a vision of yourself as you would like to be, known as the ego ideal. You will not have a plan for the future, you will not be goal-oriented. All this, underlying all this, is healthy narcissism. So narcissism is good for you. Moreover, all human beings, and that includes me, all human beings are born with a narcissism cluster of traits. Now, traits are hereditary. All traits are hereditary. Everyone is born with a cluster of traits that collectively are known as narcissism. It is what happens to these traits when they come in touch with or are triggered by abuse and trauma that leads to pathological narcissism. And now, let's disambiguate the first problem. Is it nature or nurture? Is it hereditary? Is it genetic? Or is it the outcome of upbringing, dysfunctional families, bad parenting, not good enough parents, and so on? So the answer is that we are born with this template of a hereditary narcissism, and then what happens to us as individuals crucially depends on our personal history. If we grow up in a dysfunctional family, and in a minute, in this session, I will try to elucidate what constitutes a dysfunctional family that leads specifically to narcissism. Yeah? They were born in a dysfunctional family with bad parents and so on and so forth. We are more likely to develop pathological narcissism than not. So it is the confluence of the two. You cannot say narcissism is hereditary, it's genetic, that's it. You equally cannot say narcissism is just the outcome of trauma and abuse. Because obviously, we can have multiple children, including twins, who are exposed to the same kind of familial environment, and only one of them becomes a narcissist, and the other doesn't. So obviously there is a hereditary component or a genetic component, but it has to be triggered. It's latent. It's a latent component, and it has to be triggered. And the triggering is what we call trauma and abuse, but not the way you think. I will discuss in depth the trauma and abuse, the specific trauma and abuse that lead to the emergence of pathological narcissism and nothing else. How many narcissists are there? If you ask anyone online, then there are whole families of narcissists. There are whole tribes of narcissists. Everyone and his dog and his mother-in-law is a narcissist, you know. And if you had a fight with your husband, he's instantaneously a narcissist. And of course, your wife has always been a narcissist. And the neighbors, all the neighbors except one, they're all narcissists. And the police that came to, you know, they were also narcissistic policemen and so on. So everyone is a narcissist. Unfortunately, that doesn't tally well with reality. 1.7% of the global population, general population, are diagnosed or diagnosable with narcissistic personality disorder. But wait a minute, Vaknin, you say, and if you don't say you should, wait a minute, narcissists don't attend therapy. They have hubris, they are arrogant and haughty, they have alloplastic defenses, they think nothing's wrong with them. They think everything that's happening to them, their failures and defeats and mishaps and crimes and whatever, is someone else's fault. Why would they ever attend therapy? And if they do not attend therapy, if we cannot find them in clinical settings, then they are probably underdiagnosed. Right? Wrong. That's not how we measure prevalence in populations. We measure prevalence in populations using statistical tools based on samples. The sample size has to be sufficiently big, admittedly. But we don't go and count each and every narcissist the same way we don't go and count each and every borderline. That's not how it's done. We have a sample size that satisfies significance requirements, and then we extrapolate from the sample. So, yes, it is 1.7%. And no, the fact that narcissists don't attend therapy has absolutely nothing to do with it. The few that do attend therapy are enough, a sufficiently big sample. So we know. Moreover, it may come as a shock to you. Covert narcissists attend therapy at higher rates than the general population. Not less, but more. So, in general, I would advise you to try very, very hard to erase, delete, forget, abolish, eliminate, eradicate, and obliterate, and I can go on with many more synonyms, everything you've learned online, more or less. Because the quantities of nonsense there are mind-boggling, enough to turn someone into a narcissist. So, about 1.7% of the global population are diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. There is, however, a narcissism spectrum. There are gradations of pathological narcissism, not according to the DSM. It's another mistake by self-styled experts. Not according to the DSM, but according to the ICD. The DSM does not recognize a spectrum. Actually the DSM militates against the spectrum because the DSM has discrete diagnosis. Either it's like pregnancy exactly, or you have NPD or you don't have NPD. There's nothing in between. You can't be half pregnant or quarter pregnant, except in my case. So it's better late than never, I agree. So, but according to the ICD, which is the International Classification of Diseases, it's the diagnostic manual published by the World Health Organization. The latest edition is the 11th edition, published in 2022. According to the ICD-11, there is a spectrum of pathological narcissism. There are gradations of pathological narcissism. This has been recognized long before the ICD. This has been recognized in the work of Len Sperry, in the work of Theodore Millen. These scholars suggested that there is a narcissistic personality style, not disorder, but style. Narcissistic personality style is your obnoxious neighbor. Your obnoxious neighbor. Or if you're unlucky, your obnoxious husband or wife. Probably they have narcissistic personality style because the disorder is very rare. In the ICD, they differentiate between four gradations of intensity, 4 levels of intensity, like narcissism intensity 1, narcissism intensity 2, 3, and so on. And they apply this scheme, this structure, to all personality disorders, not only to narcissism. Okay? There are major differences between the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is about 30 years behind the times, and the International Classification of Diseases, which is groundbreaking and pioneering. In the International Classification of Diseases, there is no diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder. There's no such thing. Instead, there is a single diagnosis of personality disorders. And the emphasis in the ICD is on traits and combinations of traits. So if you take some of these traits, for example, dissociality. Dissociality is the European way of saying antisocial. Dissociality. You take antagonism. You take anankastia. I'm torturing you now on a spit. Anankastia is a fancy term for obsessive compulsive features. Okay? So if you take these traits and combine them together, you get effectively a narcissist. But there's no mention of the word in the ICD. While there is a lot of mention of borderline, by the way, but we'll not go into it. Whereas in the DSM, of course, we have narcissistic personality disorder as a discrete diagnosis. They literally copy-pasted the text, the diagnostic criteria, the 9 criteria from the previous edition, which is 26 years old, and they added to it what they called the alternative model, somewhere at the very darkest recesses of the book that you can never find it. And in the alternative model, they actually wrote a piece of literature describing the narcissist. It's not so much diagnostic, it's literally literature. Dostoevsky could have written it, something like that. So serious clinicians would be much more likely to use the ICD than the DSM. It's much more updated, the latest. But unfortunately, if you want to get reimbursed as a clinician, you need to use the DSM in the United States, in Canada, in parts of the United Kingdom, in Australia, and so on. You have to use the DSM because the DSM has these numbers that you can use to get reimbursed. It's, in short, the DSM is written by the insurance companies and by pharmaceutical companies. It's a corporate product, not a diagnostic manual. Absolutely not anymore a diagnostic manual. It's way out of sync with everything we know, not only about narcissism, but about autism spectrum disorder and about, it's complete mess. Okay, so I've mentioned a few issues in narcissism that exercise and make the juices flow in online and offline. And now I want to delve a bit deeper and we are starting our journey now into a realm or a kingdom which, assuming you're not narcissist, would sound very alien to you. The equivalent of visiting an alien planet. You need to wrap your mind around what I'm about to tell you, not only now, but throughout the seminar. It's very, very alien. It doesn't sound, it sounds as if I'm describing some species from outer space. You know the famous quality movie, Plan 9 from Outer Space? I mean, it's something like that. So it's like some species from outer space. And I've been among the first to suggest 30, 40 years ago that pathological, the narcissist is a form of artificial intelligence, in effect. It's because, mind you, it's politically incorrect, of course. Never say this in university. You will lose your grades. As a clinician, you lose your license. You're never allowed to say this. I'm a professor of psychology, of long standing. And where I am, in the Commonwealth Institute, we encourage actually iconoclastic thinking. But really, think about it for a minute. If you take away empathy, here's a human being. You take away empathy, throw it to the trash. You take away the capacity to experience positive emotions, such as love, throw it to the trash. You take away the ability to tell the difference between external and internal, throw it to the trash. And so you take away, what is left? I want to understand. What constitutes a human being? Where do we cross the line beyond which we say with conviction, this is no longer a human being? The reason we tend to continue to think about narcissists as human beings is because of what is known as the intersubjective fallacy. Intersubjectivity is a field in philosophy, the philosophy of mind. And it is a mistaken belief that if two organisms look alike, they also share the same internal processes and space, and they also share the same experience of the internal processes. So, I look at you, how do I know that you're human? Because you have 2 legs and two hands and eyeglasses. So, I know that you're human. This is an extremely unsafe assumption. You may be a robot sent back in time. I have no way. I have no access to the mind. I never have, none of you has access to anyone else's mind, ever. You rely on self-reporting. The other person says, I am sad. You take it at face value. But artificial intelligence could tell you that today. So, where is the line? Where's the test? Where is the definitive test that could convince me that Mark is a human being? Well, in his case, I know the answer. I'm joking. Where's the definitive test? The answer is, in principle, we can never ever design such a definitive test. Ever. But we know a few things about the narcissist, and we make a few assumptions about what it is to be human. So, narcissists are much closer to artificial intelligence than to a human. I mean, and it's not only because I have this experience as a narcissist, but because I've worked for 32 years with thousands actually of narcissists, I have a database of narcissists and so on. And that is my absolute conclusion. Now, let's discuss a few features of pathological narcissism that are common to all relationships with narcissists. All. As a parent, as a child, as a spouse, as a romantic partner, as a friend, as a co-worker, as a politician, or a leader, in all these relationships. What I'm about to tell you for the rest of today is common to all relationships. Okay? The first thing is the locus of the cathexis. I promised you $10 words, and I am not going to disappoint you. The locus of the cathexis. Cathexis is a translation by Ferenczi of a word that was used by Freud. Consequently, Freud and Ferenczi had a lifelong feud. They became enemies because Freud thought that cathexis was a seriously bad translation. But cathexis simply means investment of energy, especially psychic energy, emotional energy, any kind of energy. It's not real energy. We probably cannot measure it in any way, shape, or form, but we all know what we are talking about. The same way we all know what we are talking about when we use the word consciousness. No one measured consciousness, no one captured consciousness, no one, but when I say consciousness, we have something shared. Similarly, cathexis is when you have this energy, when you fall in love, for example. When you fall in love, you cathect the loved one. You invest cathexis in the loved one. When you start a new project and you are into it, you cathect the project. Narcissists do not have cathexis. It's a common mistake, by the way, including Freud's mistake originally. Freud originally suggested that there is something he called narcissistic cathexis or narcissistic libido at the time. That's a mistake. It's cathexis is always directional, always outward looking. You cathect someone, you cathect something, you cathect an object, a smartphone you fell in love with, you cathect a project, but it's always outward. We differentiate between directional or intentional constructs, for example, love. Love in the romantic sense, yes? Romantic love is directional. If you fall in romantic love with yourself, you need medication, first of all, and also you're a narcissist. I will come to it a bit later. Narcissists fall in love with themselves. Narcissists have sex with themselves. They are their own sexual object. This is known as autoerotism. And this is the enormous difference between narcissists and a healthy human being. In a healthy human being, all cathexis is directional, out there. Whereas in a narcissist, all cathexis is inward looking, inward directed. All the catected objects of narcissists are inward. If all your energy flows inward rather than outward, you can never recognize the externality and separateness of other people, because the very act of recognizing you as external and separate means that I dedicated some energy to you, no? How would I know that you are separate or external? I invested some energy in finding that out or in reaching this conclusion, some energy. But this energy is about you, is directional. Narcissists are incapable of this. So they are not capable of discerning the existence of external objects. Now, when we say objects in psychology, it means people, which tells you a lot about the state of mind of psychologists. Right. Because narcissists are not capable of cathexis in the classically defined sense. I mean, we can invent something like self-cathexis, which is what Freud suggested, yes, at the time, before he gave it up. He gave up on it. But if there is no ability to cathect, there is also no object relations. If you do not recognize the externality and separateness of other people, you cannot have any relations with these other people, which is what we call in psychology object relations. Now, these are crucial insights which sound very mundane. They're not mundane. If a narcissist cannot cathect and he cannot have object relations, it's not that the narcissist object relations is impaired. It's not that the object relations are somehow partial object relations, problematic object relations, impaired, not working very well. No, none, zero, zilch, nothing. Narcissists are, in this sense, philosophically speaking, solipsistic. They're solipsists. So, when you begin to understand that the narcissist never directs energy outwards, only inwards, and never has any relationship of any kind whatsoever with another person, you then begin to get a glimmer of a shadow of a grasp of a possibility of maybe the narcissist's soul, if you wish. But I will give you a lot more insights. I'll introduce you deeper and deeper into this rabbit hole. Yeah? Another thing in narcissism is infantile defenses. The narcissist uses defenses which are typical of babies, infants. These defenses include splitting, all good, all bad, black and white. We call it dichotomous thinking, dichotomous thinking, yes? So that's one. Another type of infantile defense is projection and projective identification. I will explain these two. They're crucial to narcissistic relationships. Splitting is when the narcissist divides the world, himself, situations, collectives, and projects, you name it. Divides everything into all good, all bad. Of course, if the narcissist is pro-social, if the narcissist is a kind of someone who pretends to be moral and ethical, and then when the narcissist splits, he creates a morality play, good versus evil. This kind of narcissist would talk about the fight between good and evil, And of course, he's good. He's the good side. Yeah? So splitting. Projection is, again, something many people have misconceptions about projection. Projection is when there is a part of yourself that you find unacceptable, a part of yourself you're uncomfortable with, a part of yourself you reject, part of yourself you hate. And then you take this part and you attribute it to someone else. You project it onto someone else. So if you're stingy, you would say, you're stingy. I'm not stingy, you are. If you are hateful, if you hate people, you would say, wow, this guy or this girl, they hate people. You attribute the part that you can't live with, that you find intolerable and unbearable, you attribute it to someone else. That is projection. Only negative parts can be projected. That's a huge mistake online and even in scholarly literature. Only negative parts can be projected. When you project positive parts, that is idealization. When you project your positive parts to someone, you are idealizing them. One thing that people don't realize is that you can split yourself as well. You can divide yourself into all good and all bad. And then you can sometimes decide to project the all good part to him and the all bad part to him. So, like you could have double projection that is result of self-splitting. An example, a mother or a father, they self-split, okay? Let's take a mother. Mothers are my favorite because I can blame everything on them. And believe me, my mother deserves this. So, let's take a mother, and let's say that she undergoes a process of self-splitting. There is a part of her that she hates, a part of her that she finds humiliating and shameful, a part of her that she wants to ignore and delete and reject and forget and repress and whatever. And there is a part of her that she's very proud of, even I would say grandiose about, okay? And then she projects one part on one child and the other part on another child. The negative projection, the negative part that is projected onto the child becomes scapegoat. The positive part that is projected onto the child becomes the golden child. This is something that I was the first to describe in my work, and it's called projective splitting. We'll come to it later when we discuss parents and so on. I mentioned projective identification. There are many other infantile defenses. This seminar is not about infantile defenses, and it's not about the narcissistic dynamics. So, for example, in this seminar, I will not talk about the false self. I will mention it, but I will not go deep into it, because that's not the topic of this seminar, okay? One thing that, again, people are very mistaken about, including many scholars, including top-level scholars, is the belief that there are two types of narcissists, covert and overt. They are mistakenly called grandiose and vulnerable. Why is this a mistake? Because all narcissists are both grandiose and vulnerable. All. That's why even when you have an overt narcissist who is super in-your-face, defiant, grandiose, I'm reminded of some president who shall remain unnamed. Even when you have someone like that, he also has a vulnerable side. So if you challenge him or criticize him or mock him, he falls apart. He acts out. He goes bananas. Because simultaneously, he has grandiosity and vulnerability. Consequently, all narcissists are both covert and overt, only at different times. So if you have an overt narcissist, and that overt narcissist experiences narcissistic collapse, that overt narcissist cannot obtain supply, or is mocked or ridiculed or exposed or shamed or whatever, that narcissist would become covert. The overt would become covert. If you, on the other hand, have a covert narcissist, and suddenly by some quirk of the internet, he becomes a YouTube star. That covert narcissist will become overt. So it's wrong to say that you have overts and coverts, like some kind of typology. All narcissists are grandiose and vulnerable. All narcissists are overt and covert. All of them. These are just different phases. What is true, however, is that every narcissist is statistically more likely to be overt than covert. Like there are narcissists who would spend 70% of their lives in an overt state, and narcissists who would spend 90% of their lives in a covert state. That much is true. But you cannot say that these are pure types, because they are not pure types. There is no type constancy in. Now, we are coming to the interesting part. I just have to go through all this because this is the language that we will be using throughout the seminar. And if we are not on the same page, then it would be difficult to communicate. And if it would be difficult to communicate, then I will feel very sad and I will abuse all of you. You cannot help it. Okay. Now, all narcissism, all pathological narcissism, is compensatory. Narcissism compensates for something. What does narcissism pathological? Yes, when I say narcissism, it's pathological. What does pathological narcissist compensate for? A bad childhood. A childhood which involved trauma and abuse and maltreatment and so on. In a minute I will discuss trauma and abuse. They are badly defined, they're wrongly defined. But let's put it this way. A dysfunctional environment that did not give the child what the child needed and prevented the child from developing. This is a good definition. It catches almost all the variants. And in this kind of environment, the child compensates for the lack, compensates for the deficiency, compensates for the problematics. And this compensatory mechanism is what we call pathological narcissism. So all narcissists are compensatory, but because narcissism is compensatory, it compensates for something, it feels alien. It feels like a contraption. It feels like an invention. It feels like a piece of fiction. It doesn't feel real. You know, it's like, I don't know what example to give you. Imagine that all your life you are pot-bellied, and I'm talking about myself. You are pot-bellied and not exactly Apollo, you know, on a good day. And then you decide to compensate for it. So you go to the gym, you lift weights, or the weights lift you, depending on the day. And finally, you do develop muscles. And, you know, musculature, and women start to notice you, and even you start to notice you, and so on. All the time you will feel that it's not you. If you spend 50 years, 60 years as a pot-bellied reject, even if you go to the gym and 3 years later you're Apollo, you will feel as an imposter. There is an imposter syndrome. There's a gap between the compensatory structure or the compensatory constructs and the underlying reality or the underlying personal biography or the underlying history or the underlying memory or the underlying identity. This gap never, ever closes. Ever. Because the narcissist, therefore, is two people, the real and the imagined, or the invented, or the concocted, or the fictitious. Because a narcissist is always two people. This creates enormous problems. One of the major problems is what we call dissociative defenses, or dissociation. Narcissists have huge memory gaps. Enormous memory gaps. This is also common in borderline personality disorder. And when they experience these memory gaps, it's very frightening. Losing time is terrifying. And what they do, they confabulate. They invent stories about what might have happened, what plausibly and probably had happened in the time that was lost. So this is confabulation. This is not lying. This is not gaslighting. Psychopaths gaslight. Narcissists do not gaslight. Narcissists confabulate. What's the difference? The person who gaslights you knows that he is gaslighting you and probably is doing it for a purpose. He has a goal. Whereas the person who confabulates believes the confabulation. He believes that it really happened. He is committed to it. He's invested in it. He would protect it. If you challenge a confabulation, you will have a fight on your hands. You know, they become aggressive. Of course it happened. Absolutely. And these memory gaps are very common. You know, once I made an exercise with myself, of course, who else? And I wrote down all my memories. Well, those I could remember, obviously. I wrote them down. And I wrote down all my memories from my first marriage. I was married for 8 years. 8 years, not 8 days. I was married for 8 years. And I wrote down, and it was very close to the divorce, like immediately after the divorce. And I wrote down every single thing I remembered, like every second, every event, you know, we had a snail and we killed the snail by mistake, and I wrote it down, and we were in Rome, and there was this street, and I wrote down everything. And then I assigned a time value to each of the events. Like stepping on a snail, 15 seconds? I assigned the time value. And I added the time value. And the total was a few hours. That was the sum total of my memories from 8 years of marriage. Ask my wife.
I admit.
No, not admit. Do you confirm?
No, really, it happened. Yeah, he was very sad that he didn't have from 8.
No,
from 8 years.
No. I'm talking about something
8
else.
seconds.
In our relationship.
In our, I am the memory card.
Yes. This is real. This I'm not telling.
External, diary, archive, whatever you name it.
Young narcissist. Same.
Yeah.
Any narcissist.
Pathological narcissism.
Any narcissist.
And why is that? Why is that? Because the child's only option is to reject reality. The child must reject reality. Reality is intolerable, burdensome, frightening, menacing. You know, the child must reject reality. But the mistake of the child is that the child reaches a conclusion that the only way to reject reality is by rejecting his nascent self, his emerging self. And this is a problem that Klein got wrong, Melanie Klein, got very wrong in my view. Melanie Klein suggested that when a child is faced with the negative aspects of a parent, she used the mother, and she was heavily into pornography, so she called it bad breast and good breast. I'm not going into details. And so she said that every mother has a good breast and a bad breast. She had a very peculiar mother, I would think, but what she meant to say is that every mother has negative aspects and positive aspects as far as the child is concerned. For example, when the mother frustrates the child, that would be the bad breast. The child wants to eat, the child wants to play, and the mother is not available, or refuses, or the child is crying, and the mother leaves the child alone, which is today the advice that young mothers are given, the horrendous advice that young mothers are given. Sick, completely sick advice, but they are. And so this would be the bad breast. And the good breast is when the mother pays attention and coddles the child and, you know, the good aspects. So Melanie Klein said that what happens is the child splits the mother, and then he has a bad mother inside him and a good mother inside him. And then only much later in life, about age 3, the child learns to integrate the good mother and the bad mother in a process that is synthetic. It's kind of synthesis. He learns to integrate them. I completely disagree with Melanie Klein on this. I admire her work. By the way, she was not a psychologist, for you to know. 7 of the 10 major figures in psychology were not psychologists. Sigmund Freud was a neurologist. Winnicott was pediatrician. Melanie Klein was not a psychologist. 7 out of 10 were not psychologists. Okay, I completely disagree with her. Because I think the child would find it terrifying to internalize a bad mother. I think for the child would be unthinkable to think that mother is bad. Because it's like, if mother is bad, she will not feed me. She will not shelter me. She will let me die. A child cannot countenance this. We're talking child. When we say child, we're talking like 1-year-old, 2-year-old. I don't believe that children form any negative representation of the mother at all. So what does a child do? The child splits itself, not the mother. The child splits itself. And then the child says, I am all bad. Mother is all good. Child must believe that the mother is all good. Must. Because the alternative is existential terror. If you are 1-year-old and your mother is all bad, you are a dead 1-year-old, you know? So the only other alternative is to say, I am frustrated because something is wrong with me. I am bad, I'm unworthy. And this is what came to be known in some schools of psychology as the bad object. Originally, the phrase was primitive superego. That was the original phrase, and now we call it bad object. The child creates a bad object, and then the child learns to identify with the bad object. When the mother is constantly frustrating and upset and worse, the child ultimately becomes the bad object. That's it.
So you're talking about child before the age of 3, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Before the age of 3. No. Infant. I should say infant, not child, yes. Before the age of 3. So, in the case of pathological narcissism, the child has learned that the only way to efficaciously reject reality is by giving up on an authentic self. It's kind of like that. If I don't exist, there is no reality. Like, only if I exist is there reality. If I don't exist, there's no reality. If there's no reality, everything is fine. Then I don't have, dissonance, I don't have fear, I don't have... So the child who finds itself in a horrible environment, the only solution available to many of the children is to reject the environment by rejecting their own existence. They deny their own existence. And at that moment, the child becomes 2. The child develops an alternative self. So at that moment we're entering Winnicott's work and much later Fairbairn and others. At that moment, the ego, or what used to be called ego by Freud, the self, fractures, breaks. When the child says, reality is too much for me, I cannot tolerate it. It's painful, I'm afraid all the time, the hell with it. It's pre-verbal. It's not verbal, it's pre-verbal. We have the work by Bolas about this, exactly this period and so on. Then the child says, you know what, reality sucks, I'm giving up on reality. How can I give up on reality? I'm going to give up on me. I'm going to not exist. And by not existing, I will avoid the exigencies and the vicissitudes of reality. So I don't exist. But I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm doing other things which cannot be mentioned in a seminar. And so who is doing these things? The child is confronted with the question of, if I don't exist, who is doing all these things? And the child invents the false self. At that moment, the child splits itself, and projects all the bad parts onto the true self and all the good parts onto the false self. The child idealizes the false self and devalues the true self, which would explain to you, if you were wondering, why the narcissist can never ever get in touch with their true self. Because the true self is the receptacle and the container of everything that's negative about the child. The shame, the fear. So it's like nuclear waste buried underground. So from that moment, the true self is Chernobyl, the exclusion zone in Chernobyl, from that moment. And there is a false self. The false self is now idealized. The child took all the positive aspects of itself, projected them onto the true self, the false self, and the false self is idealized.
That serves a double purpose. Because the minute the child idealizes the false self becomes godlike. And the minute it is godlike, it can protect the child. It is impervious to pain. God doesn't care about pain. God is protective. God is also loving. The child, in one go, with one solution, one exercise, solves all the problems. By inventing the false self, the child gets rid of its negative parts, threatening parts, parts which are very minacious, gets rid of these parts, remains only with the positive parts, which acquire a divinity, become godlike. And this godlike quality also protects the child from reality, isolates the child from reality. The child renounces reality, therefore, in two ways with two steps. He takes reality and buries it in the true self, never to be visited again, ever. And he invents a reality, the reality of the false self, which is a bliss, which is wonderful, which is, he can thrive and flourish in this reality. And this is the exact mechanism of, and that's why I think Melanie Klein was very wrong in this part of her work. She was a genius in other ways. Yes?
May I ask you something? I think about Melanie Klein, I understood her that bed rest is a projection from child
Yes.
outside.
Yes, that's what I try to say. I don't believe the child can project the bed breast. I don't believe the child can accept anything bad in the mother. Cannot.
But I think it's the inner world of the child.
No. The child is reacting to the frustration. The child is reacting to the frustration of the mother. Mother frustrates the child. So the child has to split the mother internally. He creates an image of a mother which is partly good, partly bad. Here I stop. It is here that I disagree with Klein. The child can never split the mother. The child can never, internally, externally, it doesn't matter. The child can never think for a second, in any way, shape, or form, that mother is bad, or mother has bad aspects, or mother's behavior is. Child can never think of mother in bad terms. I'm not talking about a child who is 6 years old. I'm not talking about a child who is 12 years old. I'm talking about a child who is 1 year old. This kind of child would never ever think about anything negative about mother. But the child still has to explain, why am I being frustrated? Why am I being ignored? Why am I being, and the only explanation, of course, is the bad object. I'm unworthy. This is not Samvaknin only. That was the work of Strachey and many others. It precedes my work, of course. Melanie Klein in the 50s tried actually to revise psychoanalysis in this sense, because classic psychoanalysis was more or less closer to me than to her work, to my work than to her work. And I'm going back to that part. Okay. Because the child buried itself, its real self, buried the negative aspects in the true self, the child remains with a construct. The construct is what Winnicott called the false self. Yes. And initially there's no identification of the construct. Initially there's no internalization of the construct. Here I'm talking about Melanie Klein again. Yeah. Initially these processes, there's no incorporation, no internalization, no introjection, no identification with the construct. The construct is perceived as alien, as external, indeed as a god. What I'm suggesting in my work is that pathological narcissism is a form of primitive religion. What happens is the false self is a Moloch. It's a deity or a divinity. And the child, exactly like primitive ancients, engages in human sacrifice. But who can the child sacrifice? What human the child has access to be sacrificed to this new God? The child. The only human being the child has access to is the child. So the false self becomes a demanding Old Testament divinity asking for human sacrifices, and the child then sacrifices itself. This is the mechanism of the true self, the repression of the true self. It's human sacrifice. And pathological narcissism is a form of ancient religion or primitive religion invented by each and every child who is subjected to these circumstances. And it has great affinity with the characteristics of primitive ancient religions. I'm telling you that because many, many clinicians ask, why is pathological narcissism so intractable? Why we can deal with borderline pretty efficaciously, you know? Borderline is a serious problem. I mean, like Kernberg suggested that borderline is pseudo-psychotic, you know? It's not a minor issue. And yet we have enormous success with borderline. Why we can deal with, even with schizophrenia, we are not so bad. I'm talking about talk therapy, not about medication. Even with schizophrenia, we're not so bad. Even with psychotic disorders, we're not so bad. The only diagnosis I'm aware of where there is utter, unmitigated, complete failure is narcissism. Complete. What do I mean complete? You can modify the narcissist's behaviors. Of course, you can help the narcissist to modify behaviors. You can, to some extent, tweak some of the narcissist's abrasive, antisocial misconduct. You can play with some parameters. You cannot touch the core. End of story. Any clinician tells you otherwise is lying to you or self-deluding. The core of pathological narcissism is not touchable. End of story. Why? Why this intractability? And what I'm suggesting, it's because it's a religion. Have you ever tried to argue with a religious person? It's hopeless. And in addition to that, there is enormous incentive to not reverse engineer pathological narcissism because the true self becomes a receptacle, becomes this Chernobyl exclusion zone. I'm, of course, not the first and not the only one who is suggesting this. Many scholars suggest that pathological narcissism is a reaction to shame. I also suggest in my work that it's a reaction to grief. There's a lot of grief. The child grieves. All these emotions, all these negative affects, there's also envy. Melanie Klein discussed envy in pathological narcissism. All these negative affects coalesce and are buried deep in the true self. Why would the narcissist open this Pandora's box? Why would any narcissist open this Pandora's box? And how is existence guaranteed? Who guarantees existence? If the clinician were to open the Pandora's box and all these demons, the shame, the grief, the rage, the envy, all of them would emerge. Who guarantees that this will not induce suicidal ideation and worse? Indeed, when this happens naturally in a process known as narcissistic mortification, described mostly by Libby, although Freud was the first to mention it, but Libby is a big scholar. When narcissistic mortification happens naturally, the narcissist becomes emotionally dysregulated, exactly like borderline, and develops extreme suicidal ideation. Narcissistic mortification is when the narcissist is faced with these buried affects. Narcissistic mortification is when the narcissist is shamed or humiliated abruptly, without preparation. It's not injury. Injury is a process. Like I can tell you something, you tell me something else, I tell you something else, and after 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes, I will be finally narcissistically injured. Mortification is abrupt. It's also usually, not always, usually public, and it involves humiliation. These are the key components of mortification. When mortification happens, the narcissist becomes suicidal and indistinguishable clinically from borderline personality organization. So we know what happens. Why would any narcissist in his right mind, and we'll talk about the narcissist's mind later, why would any narcissist in his right mind choose this path, choose this solution? It's crazy. Maybe it's the only case where the narcissist is actually rational. Okay. Questions. There will be time for questions. And also I should take into account Mark's presentation, so there's a delicate balancing act here, and I'm not very good with balance. Yeah.
Can I take my shopping list?
Do not buy cabbage.
No, no. But can I take it? This is it? No,
Lydia, what are you doing?
I need the empty page.
Empty page?
Yeah. Anyone? What is it?
One empty page coming up.
A new
Apropos,
shopping list.
apropos empty page, one of the key clinical features in pathological narcissism is what came to be known in the 80s as the empty schizoid core. The empty schizoid core was described at length, most famously, by Seinfeld. Not that Seinfeld, another Seinfeld. And the empty schizoid core is simply the clinical observation, or I believe it's a clinical fact, that there is nobody there. Because the narcissist as a child chose to deny reality by rejecting or denying itself, that left a void, and that void has never been fulfilled. The narcissist appears to be human, talks, walks, makes jokes, some of them work, some of them don't work, gives seminars, narcissists give seminars. Some of them are professors of psychology. And yet it's very deceiving. There is nobody there. It's complete absence. It's not absence in the sense of not being, like chair, I removed the chair, there is an absence of chair. But there was a chair there, yeah? It's not the same. It's not a negation of an entity, not a negation of an entity that existed. It is the presence of absence. The only thing that is present is the absence. Thustin was a scholar of autism spectrum disorders. And Thustin was suggested that we call it the black hole. So today we use the metaphor of the black hole. There's a black hole there. I don't know how to communicate this to you. Not experientially. I don't know how to communicate this to you intellectually even. Think of deep space. Think of vacuum. We used to think of vacuum as emptiness, nothing there. But today we know in physics, I'm a physicist by the way, my PhD is physics. Today we know in physics that in the vacuum, there is spontaneous creation of particles. So think of it as a dynamic vacuum, a vacuum which allows for the spontaneous creation of particles or spontaneous creation of psychological processes. It is as if the vacuum acquired an identity, as if the vacuum became. Think of an absence that becomes. Now, we have a language for this. I'm very averse to using it. It's a religious language. When you go to the Middle Ages, they describe this. They say that there is a vacuum that becomes, and that vacuum, this emptiness that becomes, they call it demons, they call it the devil, but they were trying to cope with this phenomenon, and this is the language I came up with. A vacuum, an absence that becomes a presence, an absence masquerading as a presence, an automaton who is sufficiently deceiving to convince you that it is not an automaton. In 1970, there was a roboticist, a Japanese roboticist. His name was Masahiro Mori. And Masahiro Mori came with the concept of the uncanny valley. Masahiro Mori said that the more robots will come to resemble human beings, the more we human beings, or you human beings, would feel ill at ease. You would feel less and less comfortable, more and more threatened, more and more ill at ease, the more the robots will come to resemble human beings, not the opposite. When you see a robot that does not resemble a human being, like a spider crawling on six, you know it's a robot, it's not a problem. But what if you see a robot that is 99% simulation of a human being? it has a skin, it has eyeballs, it has, you would still, as a human being, you would feel some discomfiture. You would feel something wrong. You would feel something is off key. You would feel that something is half-baked, something not put together correctly. This is the uncanny valley reaction described by Masahiro Mori. I applied it to pathological narcissism, and I suggested that people react to the presence of the narcissist that way. This hypothesis was later confirmed mainly in 2012. There was a series of studies, and they appear in a book by Keith Campbell. And these studies found that people react to the presence of narcissists even in photographs, and even to an email composed by a narcissist, that they react with 80% accuracy, and they react within 3 seconds. So my hypothesis was actually confirmed, and this is the experimental foundation for the uncanny valley reaction. So, all this is because the narcissist is not there, does not exist. So this is the empty schizoid core. Finally, you need to take into account that narcissists have an insecure attachment style. All narcissists have an insecure attachment. So there are many types of insecure attachment. And some narcissists are dismissive, some narcissists are anxious, never mind. But all of them have insecure attachment style because they have had a seriously bad experience with the first attachment. Yes, if you learn from your mother, and usually it's the mother, I'm sorry to say. I'm sorry to say, Bowlby is sorry to say, Freud is, all the major authorities agree that it's the mother, basically. If you learn that love leads to pain, if you learn that attachment ends badly, if you learn that you have to denigrate and demean yourself, you have to consider yourself a bad object because the alternative is a bad mother. If you learn all this, you will avoid in the future attachments and bonds and love. And it's a learned thing. You're conditioned in effect. There are reinforcements. There are reinforcements that play along. And this is known as the internal working model. So narcissists have an internal working model which is anti-relationships. Internal working model which says relationships end badly. Internal working model is a concept developed by Bowlby, the father of attachment theory. And it simply says that we all have a model, we all have a theory about how relationships work. Narcissists have an insecure attachment and a problematic internal model. Okay, this was the boring part. And now let's get into what I consider to be less boring part. I mentioned that the narcissist is empty, that it is an absence masquerading as a presence, that it is a deceptive facade, that it is a mirage, that you all sometimes fall for it. But that if you get close enough to the narcissist, usually within 3 to 30 seconds, according to studies, you develop a sense of discomfort and so on. The majority of you would deny that. You would repress it. You would ignore this alarm, this alert, because it's not okay to judge someone in 3 seconds, and it's politically incorrect, and you should give a second chance, and something maybe is wrong with you, you had a bad day. You will come up with some narrative why you shouldn't listen to your gut instinct. You shouldn't listen to your intuition. You should ignore your uncanny valley reaction. But this emptiness is a result of a disruption, a profound disruption in the formation of the self. You see, between the ages of 1 and 3 years old, some scholars say 6 months and 3 years old, we develop gradually. There are 2 processes, 2 events. They're not events because they're processes, but let's call them events. 2 major events. They're cataclysmic, they're catastrophic, they're shocking, and they define you. The first one, mother's gaze. you realize that mother is not you. It's a major trauma, and I will come to it in a minute. The second thing, you begin to feel continuous, whereas up to age 18 months, more or less, children feel discontinuous. We know that because there are observations by Piaget and many others that showed us that children, for example, have no memory about things they've done a few minutes ago. They forget where they put objects, for example. So they have no, what we call constancy. They have what Piaget called impermanence. Yes. So children feel discontinuous, disjointed. And the second major event, they suddenly begin to feel continuous. In other words, they feel I. They have the I. It's me. There was no me before. It's me. What does it mean, it's me? It's me who was yesterday. It's me who is now. It's the same me. Imagine how shocking this realization is. The experiences I've had yesterday and the experiences I'm having today belong to the same person. And this is what we call the self. The self, the best definition of the self that I know of, is a sense of continuity. When you have a sense of continuity, that is the self. Now, let's start with the mother's gaze. Initially, the child is in a state that Vera Mahler at the time called the symbiotic phase. We don't use this anymore. We don't call it the symbiotic phase, but I think it's not a bad moniker. Symbiotic phase means that the child could not tell the difference between itself and the mother. In other words, the child did not have what Freud called earlier ego boundaries. The child couldn't say, I end here and mother begins here. Or mother ends here and I begin. There was no such thing. Mother, child, and the world, because mother was the world, brought the world into the equation and represented the world. Mother, child, and world were one. A single entity. A single entity. And then one day, a schism happened, a break. The world became a duality. The world was no longer mono, it was dual. Okay, thank you. At one point, the child saw itself in the mother's eyes. At one point, the child was reflected in the mother's gaze. Now, the need to be seen is a primordial atavistic survival mechanism. If you're a baby and you're not seen, you're a dead baby. Babies use special cues. For example, why do babies smile? Babies smile exactly for this. They want to be noticed. They want to be seen by mother. That's why babies have what we call reflexive empathy. Mother smiles, baby smiles. And that happens after 6 days, the first 6 days of life. So the child needs to be seen. But initially, in the first few months of life, the child is seen by itself. The mother is the child. So there is what Freud called narcissistic libido, narcissistic object relations. The child is seen by itself. The child is its own observer. And then at some point, the child realizes someone else is seeing me, mother is seeing me. That is a major trauma. Can you imagine? It's a major trauma. Because as long as the baby and the mother are one, the baby is in charge. The baby controls the situation. The baby is the master. The baby doesn't need to be afraid, no anxiety, no terror, no, because we are one, you know. But if mother is a separate thing, entity, object, call it as whatever you wish, because the baby says, I see myself in her eyes, she cannot be me. I see myself in her gaze, she cannot be me. So there is me and not me. Suddenly there is me and not me. That is massive trauma. Because at that point, the child develops what Sartre and others called existential angst. At that point, the child realizes, my life depends on someone else. And that someone else can take away my life, has the capacity to take away my life. And it is here, that here is the emergence of the first dissonance. Because on the one hand, the child wants to be seen. The child needs to be seen. If the child is not seen, the child is dead. The child needs to attract attention. So there's a need to be seen and the terror of being seen. Right? Mother sees me, then I'm dependent on her. Then she can do anything to me. She can kill me. She can ignore me. If I am not one with mother, I am not in control and anything bad can happen to me. So it's a trauma. So there's a need to be seen and a terror of being seen, a huge fear of being seen. And this is what we call in psychology dissonance. That's the emergence of the first dissonance, and it gives rise to anxiety, existential angst, existential anxiety. What happens with the narcissist is that the narcissist has no gaze. The narcissist mother has no gaze. She doesn't offer the narcissist a gaze, the child, a gaze. André Green, who is a French psychoanalyst, he called it the dead mother, metaphorically dead mother. It's a mother who is absent, emotionally absent, disinterested, depressed and unable to function, absent physically. A mother who is not there, a mother who parentifies the child, she cannot act as a parent, a mother who instrumentalizes the child, uses the child as a tool for self-gratification, all kinds of wrong bad mothers, not good enough mothers. These mothers do not offer the child a gaze. So the child learns to internalize the mother's absence, not the mother's gaze, but the mother's absence. Imagine how terrifying this is. So let me summarize it for you because it's a bit complicated. The child is born, the child thinks that it's one with mother, it's called symbiotic phase, and the child feels very happy and in control and safe, secure base, we call it secure base, feels safe, and so on and so forth. And then, at some point, the child realizes that there is mother's gaze. It sees itself in mother's gaze, realizes that we are two separate entities, anything can happen. There's a terror there, and this creates anxiety, the need to be seen and the fear of being seen creates anxiety. This is in a healthy child. What happens with the healthy child? What is the solution? Internalize mother. The solution is, now I have this anxiety that I may lose mother with her gaze, that I may not be seen. I have an easy solution. I'm going to internalize her. I'm going to create an internal mother, which represents my real mother. And when my real mother is not there, I'm going to interact with my internal mother. And this, we call this object constancy or object permanence. So this is the solution in a healthy child. What happens when the child looks at the mother and there is no gaze? There is no gaze. The child never learns to separate. Right? If there's no gaze, there's no separation. The child remains stuck in the symbiotic phase. We call it separation individuation failure. We'll come to it a bit later. So the child doesn't separate initially, doesn't separate through the gaze because there's no gaze. But even much worse, whereas the healthy child internalizes a living, functioning, present mother, yes, a mother who is there, the mother may frustrate the child, the mother may shout at the child, the mother may even beat the child, but she's there. So the healthy child internalizes an existing living mother. The child who becomes narcissist has a dead mother, So that child internalizes an absence. Do you follow me? All of you follow me, yeah? When the mother is dead, not there, not available, absent, this is what the child will internalize, obviously. And because the child internalizes an absence, and because there is no gaze, the child never separates from the mother. It's not what people think, that the narcissist is in love with his mother, or that the narcissist constantly talks to his mother. I haven't spoken to my mother 30 years, more than 30 years, not a word. But the narcissist is one with his mother, regardless of actual interactions, talking to her or whatever. The mother is, the absence of the mother is there, and the narcissist can never disengage. In short, to disengage from the mother, you need feedback from the mother. You need some pushback from the mother. You need the mother to kind of be there for you to bounce off the mother. Yeah? But if there's nobody there, like, that's it. You're stuck. You're stuck in... And then at the age of 3, between 18 months and 36 months, the child having realized that mother is external, that mother is not me, the child develops boundary. This is me up to here, this is mother from here. The child then begins to say, wait a minute, mother is not me, I am me. I have a sense of continuity. So let's see, let's explore the world. And the child begins to explore other options. Initially, possibly other mothers. In his mind, all others are mothers. Yeah? But the child begins to explore. And at the beginning, the child is very frightened. You need to be very grandiose. When you're 2 years old, you need to be grandiose to let go of mother and explore the world. Yeah? So the child is a bit frightened initially, and so the child walks a few steps and then runs back to mother and hugs her legs. You know, anyone here who has been a mother went through this, where the child explored and it has all kinds of names: separation, individuation, rapprochement, never mind all this. This is the phase where the child finally makes a break with mother. But to break with mother, you need to have a mother. You can't break with that which is not there. You can't break with an absence. And again, when I say absence, I don't mean the mother is physically dead, although that also applies. I'm talking about a metaphorically dead mother, a mother who, for some reason, is not providing the proper feedback to the child that allows the child to differentiate itself, to distinguish itself. In other words, this mother, this dead mother, does not allow the child to become. The process of becoming is compromised. And because there's no mother there are no boundaries. And because there's no boundaries, there is no self. Because there's no self without boundaries. If I ask you, what is your self? You'll say, this is me and this is not you. Every self has two underlying, hidden, implicit sentences. This is me, this is not me. This is me, you not me. These are the sentences. Boundary condition. Ego boundaries. Call them as you wish. If you don't have a mother, you don't have a boundary. And if you don't have a boundary, you will never have a self. Narcissists, ironically, are egoless. They are not egotistic. They don't have an ego. Ironically. They don't have a self. Then you can say, okay, who is giving us this seminar? Mr. Vaknin. First of all, don't call me Mr. Vaknin. I'm Professor Vaknin to you. Now,
Black hole.
yes. Who is giving this seminar? And here you must distinguish between what we call episodic and semantic. So, an absence can acquire semantic memories and procedural memories. Semantic memories and procedural memories mean how to do things, facts, facts, or even inventings. Like this whole has to do with semantic and procedural memory. Episodic memory depends crucially on the existence of a self. Episodic memory is autobiographical memory, personal history memory. And you don't have that if you don't have a self. Remember what I told you about the self? When we were all much younger, I told you the self is a sense of continuity. You don't have a sense of continuity, you don't have a self. And because the narcissist doesn't have a self, indeed, it does not have a sense of continuity. It is not only dissociative, but narcissists cannot connect actions with consequences. That's why you see narcissists shocked when they are arrested. What on earth? You know? Because in order to predict the consequences of your actions, let alone accept them, you need to have a sense of time. And narcissists are atemporal. They do not have a sense of time. I was the first to suggest this, and then Kernberg also suggested it, without credit. Okay. Narcissists are atemporal. They don't have a sense of time because the sense of time crucially depends on a sense of continuity, which crucially depends on a self, which crucially depends on a boundary, which crucially depends on a mother's gaze. So we are beginning to see that narcissists don't have a self, don't feel continuous, don't have a conception of time, and so on and so forth. And I hope you are beginning to grasp the emerging contours of the narcissist. It's an amorphous entity. It's more akin to amoeba than to, it's amorphous. It shapeshifts. It shapeshifts all the time. It's capable of great things. Look at me. But don't confuse this with the internal landscape. Everything the narcissist does is external, ironically. The narcissist does not recognize your external existence, but everything he does is external because he has also no internal existence. The narcissist, therefore, is a organism with no internal space and no external space and no boundary condition. That's what I meant when I said narcissists are absences. They're vacuum. So, and it's very difficult to wrap your mind around this. I understand you, and I even sympathize with you, which is very rare for me. I understand you because how can this be? Like, give me a break, Vaknin. Do you like narcissistic supply? Yes. So, you do have an internal experience. No. The same way artificial intelligence probably has no internal experience yet. There may come a time where artificial intelligence will develop sufficient level of consciousness and so on, and probably will develop an internal experience, although we have no way of ever proving this. But still, right now, everyone is in agreement, I think, that artificial intelligence does not have an internal existence, does not have an internal landscape, does not have internal dynamics, and yet it interacts with you. Does it recognize you as external entities, separate from it? Does it care about your wishes and dreams and hopes and fears? Is there any way in which it accepts your independence and agency and autonomy? Of course not. All these questions are ridiculous. And yet, an artificial intelligence entity with an appropriately built robot could simulate me or imitate me 100%. And you would never, ever know the difference unless there's a glitch. And only then you will realize that something has gone wrong. Indeed, the only time we are able to observe the narcissist's inner workings, such as they are, is when there is a glitch, when there is narcissistic injury, when there is narcissistic mortification, when there is narcissistic collapse, when there is conflict. Only then we're able to gain some kind of insight into what makes the narcissist tick, if anything at all. Similarly, of course, we study, as a physicist, we study elementary particles by kind of creating collisions between them. It's the only way to study them. Because elementary particles have no inner structure. I'm talking, for example, quarks, they don't have an inner structure. So the only way to find out what the hell is happening is to create collisions. The same applies to a narcissist. Now, I'm telling you all this because if you are trying to understand how narcissists function in a romantic relationship, or they have a child is born, or you are bound to impose on these relationships some kind of narrative which would yield meaning. All human beings are machines, devices that seek meaning. We always attempt to find meaning. Typically, we try to find meaning by establishing patterns. We try to find a pattern. And we believe that a pattern gives us meaning, which is wrong, by the way, philosophically, but okay. Typically, we do this. We even have a tendency to impose patterns where there are no patterns. This is known as pareidolia. Yes? So we seek patterns and we seek meaning. When you see the narcissist interacting with his child, he plays with the child, he smiles with the child, he pinches the child, especially pinches the child, and so on and so forth. You're bound to impose on this a narrative. You're bound to say, this narcissist loves his child, or likes his child, or he likes children, or you're bound to try to find meaning. You're mining meaning. It's like mining Bitcoin. You're trying to mine meaning and there is no meaning there. I'm trying to convey to you why. These actions, these activities are comparable to some type of programming, maybe. I mean, if you observe cellular activities in the body, in any organism, observe cellular activities, we typically impose some kind of what we call teleological narrative, a narrative that says there's a purpose here. So, for example, many of you would say, the bee, the honeybee, goes to the flower to pick up pollen in order to make honey. When you say in order, you are anthropomorphizing. You are imposing a framework of meaning. Bees go to flowers. Bees fly to flowers. No question about this. Bees pick up pollen, and bees create honey. End of story. There's no intentionality here. There's no purpose. There's no thinking. It's a program thing. It's a high level of programming, very high level, which creates the illusion that there is a purpose. And we call this mistake teleology. When we observe a narcissist, we impose on the narcissist a narrative the same way we do with the honeybee. We say, he found, let's say, there's a romantic relationship, and we say, okay, he's really in love. He's in love. Maybe it's short term, but he's in love. Or he loves his children. None of it is true. Similarly, when you say a narcissist does this in order to, you are 99% of the time mistaken. So if you were to say a narcissist does this in order to extract narcissistic supply, you're mistaken. A narcissist knows that if he does A, there is B. But that's the extent of it. There is causation, but there is no intentionality. To intend to do something, you need a self. It's very difficult to understand, and when I will discuss the particulars of every type of relationship, I will go deeper and try to somehow introduce you to this. But think of it as a kind of sequencing machine, a machine that knows that every A ends in B, every B leads to C, and consequently engages in these behaviors. There's like a giant table. Similarly, narcissists imitate emotions and empathy. They know how to imitate emotions and empathy because they know if A, then B. If person cries, they are sad. So if I want to imitate sad, I will cry. So narcissist will cry because he is imitating sadness. He has this enormous, what I call emotional resonance tables. And in these resonance tables, every human behavior is tabulated, and next to it, what other people interpret, how they interpret the behavior. So, human cry, human said. How do I know that human said? Because everyone says that people who cry are sad. Here's my first entry in the table. So, let's reverse it. If I want to communicate to people that there is sadness, I will cry. I don't really feel sadness. I mean, not me, but narcissists don't really feel sadness. It's just, this is the connection. This is it. A leads to B. There's no, do you understand that? It's a machine. Think of it as a machine. And the high level of programming is very high. It's programming language, it's not machine language. It's very high level, but it's still ultimately programming. So you can find a narcissist who suddenly displays empathy, or is full of emotions, or gives an arousing speech that motivates all of you to do something, and so on. How did he know to give an arousing speech? Was he aroused? Did he experience the arousal? Does he also feel so strongly about the issue? No. He just knows that if you combine this word with that word, with this word, with that word, that will be the statistically typical reaction in people. And that is Machiavellianism. That is manipulation. Again, I will give you a personal story because I love to talk about myself. So I write poetry. And believe it or not, it's a fact, I won the International Poetry Award in 2000, I think, if I remember correctly. There was a huge competition, 8,000 entries from 43 countries and what. I won the award. I won the first place. I won many other awards. If you go to there's a page of my poetry, you will find links to all the awards. Of course, I'm a narcissist, so you'll find links to all the awards. But this raises an interesting question. How on earth did I win awards? I mean, how did I write poetry that motivated poetry lovers, presumably the judges, to give me an award? And there's an article that I wrote trying to explain to non-narcissists how this is done. I know combinatorics. I know which words to combine to obtain a highly specific impact or series of impacts. And then I combine them. Similarly, recently, artificial intelligence is writing not bad poetry. Not bad. I read some.
Why you write poetry?
Sorry?
Why you write poetry then?
Because it elicits, because I get awards, narcissistic supply. What?
He loves words.
Yeah.
He adores words.
Yes, of course, because words are instruments.
It's not about creativity.
I can obtain outcomes.
To get a word.
But it's not about creativity, right? It's not about creativity.
It is creativity. What do you mean? I'm very creative.
You put two words that will resonate so.
Yeah.
That's out.
We stop here, and then questions and answers, and then Mark. Mark, you wouldn't mind, let's say,
Yes, that's fine.
20, 30 minutes, and then you...
Perfect.
Yeah, let's start. You.
Yep. Good question. Would you trade true self to all your accomplishments?
No.
Oh boy.
I'm incapable of even considering the question, because I don't have any other experience. You're asking me, would you trade something you have never experienced for something you have experienced? And I don't think it's a question that can be answered even by a healthy person. You need to compare it to something, you know? Yeah, I will come to you. No, please.
thinking
Never
about-
give your place to someone. Yeah.
I was thinking about the memory. You were explaining the example where you about your 8-year marriage. So I was thinking about the narcissistic discard and hoovering. Like when the narcissist discards you for whatever reason, and then they come back to you after some time and hoover you. Could it be also not just like they try to kind of manipulate you back, but also because they kind of forgotten that you are actually a persecutory object, and then they suddenly like kind of a new person, all new person, and they try to do everything all over again. So repetition, compulsion.
Your very,
Also because of the memory.
your very language betrays the extreme difficulty in understanding narcissism, because you said take them back.
Kind of just.
Not kind of.
re-identification.
There's no back.
Okay.
It's not back. It's not a recreation of something that has happened before.
Okay.
Everything is new from zero.
It's a new person.
Up new situation, not new person. Narcissist is not crazy. He knows it's not a new person. But it's a new situation. That's why narcissists are very shocked when hoovering fails.
Yeah,
Like-
I've been through it, so I.
Like, why would it fail? What's the big deal here? And narcissists would have a fight with you or talk to you, and then would cut you off for 5 years. And then he would call you, and he would continue the conversation from the last sentence that you spoke, as if no time has passed.
It happened already to me, so.
Yes, I'm sure it happened. I'm talking from experience. So it's as if no time has passed. There's no time in narcissism. And there's no continuity, and there's no back and forth, and there's no history. So this was the high IQ part, because if you have high IQ, you leave. Yeah. Sorry, I promised the chairman. Yeah.
What would you say was your initial motivation to try to understand all these psychological things, particularly about the self-protection?
I was a businessman, and I was caught in a securities fraud. I ended up in prison, and I lost everything I had, and so on and so forth. There was, and then, I mean, before that, like 10 years before that, I started to study narcissism. Narcissism was then a new diagnosis. It was just introduced into the DSM-3. And I had this girlfriend, and she said, if you don't go to a psychiatrist, I will break up with you. At that time, I was a heavy, heavy multimillionaire, so we were flying weekly from the United Kingdom to Canada. In Canada, there was an Israeli psychologist, and he told me, you would fit well into narcissistic personality disorder. I asked him how many give me scholarly literature. He said, there's none. It's a new diagnosis. I said, okay, thank you. And I went back, but starting in '84, I started to learn, to study, and so on and so forth. I didn't think of it much, but then in 1995, 96, when I was mistakenly released from prison, it was a serious mistake, I realized that people around me were enormously interested in the topic, because I was talking about it, and people around me were congregating and assembling, and like never before. Like, I was not only a businessman, I was also a pretty known intellectual in Israel, public intellectual, and I knew how much with each topic, what's the size of the audience and so on. And I never saw such reactions in my life. I realized, wow, that's a great source of supply. And then I started my work on narcissism, seriously. That's how it's supply. Don't try to overcomplicate narcissism. It's a binary machine. Yes, supply, no supply. Yes, supply feel good, no supply feel bad. That's it. And that's an advanced complex narcissist, more or less. It's a very, very simple contraption. The thing is that people think that to display complex behaviors, you need to have a complex entity, which is completely untrue. Simple processes, simple entities can yield amazingly complex outcomes. If you just stop to think about it, hydrogen, the simplest atom, and oxygen, not so simple, but definitely not uranium, yeah? You take the two of them, you get water, you get ice, you get, it's So, and this is known as epiphenomenalism, emergentism. So you could have a simple entity, an unusually simple, I would say even binary entity. Of course, computers, 1 0, 1 0, 1 0, look what's happening, you know. So the narcissist is a 1 0 computer, binary, yes supply, no supply. And from this, all these phenomena emerge. Complexity emerges out of this simplicity. It's pathological narcissism is a machine language. It's a machine code. It's like when I studied computers, it was assembly. It's like assembly. It's a machine language. And it can give rise to much more complex languages and finally to user interfaces. And what you see in front of you is a user interface. I'm a user interface. Underneath, my chips are running machine language. And this is what people, they don't digest this. How is possible this? I mean, that such a simple thing can give such complex outcomes. It can, and does. Yeah, any other question? Yeah.
You're sharing a lot of your experience to substantiate your work, and I think it's a very special, unique aspect to this. And so I got a little bit of curious at one point. I don't know if you can share something more about it when you mentioned transforming a man with a belly to a Adonis gorgeous body. Is there really not a drop of positive emotions, positive experience that one can have from such a strong stimuli like changing a body?
No, I didn't talk about the affective aspect. You could change your body and you will have positive effects, of course. You will feel more. And also you will have compounded effects like self-confidence or self-esteem and so on and so forth, your sense of self-worth. You can even use your new body to regulate, to become more regulated, more stable. All this is true, but all this has nothing to do with a sense of identity. It's true, but nothing to do with identity.
So this Adonis body, this is your experience, your self-report as
No,
well?
I gave this as an example that a child, when the child creates the false self, initially the child does not identify with the false self. There's alienation. There is what we call in psychology estrangement. There is an estrangement between the child and the false self. Only gradually over decades, the child learns to internalize, identify, incorporate what Melanie Klein described, the false self, and becomes the false self. But that's a process. It takes time. That's why interventions in early childhood should be efficacious, should be efficient. Only we don't catch narcissists so early. But if we were able to catch narcissists when they are 3 years old, or even I think 6 years old, or even maybe 9 years old, I think we could reverse the pathology. But not when the narcissist is 25 or 45 or let alone 65. So not to confuse affects and with identity. Identity relies crucially on a sense of continuity and memory. And the narcissist has neither, not memories and not continuity. So narcissist is incapable of developing what we call core identity. He has what we call identity diffusion or identity disturbance, similar to borderline. Same situation in borderline. That's why borderlines, I don't know how many of you know, borderlines have a false self. I don't know how many of you know this. So whenever there's a situation of disruption to the formation of the self, and disruption could be for many reasons, whenever there is such a situation, there is usually a compensatory self that emerges, or compensatory process, estrangement, and identity diffusion. These are classical outcomes of disruption of self. I will take this opportunity to explain when I say abuse and trauma, you're thinking about beatings, incest, and or having to watch Netflix or seriously abusive events. Abuse is any situation where the child is not allowed to develop boundaries or the boundaries are breached, and consequently the child cannot develop, cannot become. So of course incest is the ultimate breach of boundaries. But also if you parentify the child, there is a breach of boundaries here and the child cannot become. It cannot become a child. It becomes a parent substitute, a pseudo-parent. If you instrumentalize the child, if the child becomes a tool or instrument, as a parent, you have unfulfilled dreams, and the child will fulfill these dreams. So you instrumentalize the child. That's also, the child is not allowed to become. So if you spoil the child and pamper the child, that is also abuse. And it is abuse because denying the child friction with reality, denying the child access to peers, for example, if you're overprotective, that retards, that prevents and arrests personal development. The child cannot become. Only pushback from reality, pushback from peers, only failures, only losses, only defeats teach us to become. We become through loss. We don't become through success. We become through failure. We become through loss. We become through pain. We are creatures of pain. That's why we are also creatures of dreams. In our dreams, life is painless. But life is painful, and it is through pain and loss that we become. And so when we are denied the possibility to experience pain and loss, when we are overprotected, when we are spoiled, when we are pampered, when we are told that we are always right, for example, at that point, that is abuse, because the child cannot become. So abuse has many forms. Many forms. It's not true that abuse is only beatings and, this is completely untrue. I would say the vast majority of cases of abuse do not involve any physical contact or whatsoever. On the very contrary, the parents appear to be great parents or good parents, but they're not. And in all these situations, 1.7% of the children will develop narcissistic personality disorder. Others will develop borderline personality. I mean, there will be a pathology of some kind, but we're talking about narcissism. One more question, and then I will... nine more questions, and then... No, Mark has to have his time. Just give me a minute, will you? Yeah. Tomorrow, those of you who survive and or are sufficiently masochistic, we will discuss the developmental path of narcissism, because there are various developmental paths. It's not true that narcissism is created only one way. There are many ways to create a narcissist. And it all depends on what Winnicott called good enough mother or good enough parenting, which unfortunately vast majority of parents fail to achieve. And that's why I think we have an epidemic or pandemic of mental illness, because I think parenting quality has deteriorated dramatically in the past few decades. But parents would say, but it's not true. My mother used to beat me up. I'm giving my child freedom. Giving the child too much freedom is abusive, for example. Succumbing to the child's wishes and demands is abusive. Spoiling and pampering the child is abusive. Overprotecting the child is abusive. There are many ways to abuse a child, and parents have become way more abusive than, let's say, 50 years ago. Way more abusive. So, and they don't realize it. They think they're actually being much better parents. Yeah, you had your... You at the very end.
I just want to understand your theory of the false self as a form of a primitive religion. Why does the false self, why is it so demanding as a primitive God? Why does it require the sacrifice and this complete? Wouldn't it be happy and fulfilled and quite self-sufficient? Why does it need to sacrifice?
I think you've answered your own question. The foundational demand of the false self is that the child destroys the true self. That's a demand. Why does the false self demand it of the child? Because the true self is toxic, contains toxic waste.
I'm sorry, but is it superego? The false self is superego.
No, nothing to do with superego. Actually, narcissists do not have a superego. They don't have an ego. A superego is part of the ego. It's not a separate structure. So narcissists don't have an ego, and consequently they don't have a superego. And it has nothing to do with false self in any case. The false self is not necessarily moral. Superego represents society. It's the representation of society within the child through socialization agents, like the parents. So it's like the false self says, listen, you're in a very dangerous situation. You can die. It's horrible what's happening here. The only way out of this is you need to kill yourself. The only way out of this reality is to not be in reality anymore. So you need to kill yourself. You need to destroy the true self. That's it. And so this is the demand of the God. Now, such a God, by definition, is also automatically, in a way, sadistic or over-demanding. Or because if the foundational demand is to destroy yourself, imagine what else it can ask. Later on, there are other mechanisms, for example, grandiosity, cognitive distortion of grandiosity, and so on and so forth. And the false self becomes self-protective or self-preserving. Because the problem with this false self, it's false. It's counterfactual. It's a piece of fiction. So it is open to attack by reality. Reality attacks the false self all the time. So in order to survive, the false self demands exclusivity, complete control, lack of internal challenge or dissonance, etc., etc. So then it becomes demanding in order to survive in a reality that keeps challenging and undermining and threatening the cohesion and the functioning of the false self. It's a war. The narcissist is in a constant state of war. Constantly, he's fighting against reality. He's fighting inside against the true self. He's fighting other people who he believes are. So there's paranoid ideation. It's a constant state of battle. It's a conflictual state, a dissonant state. Narcissism is a dissonant state, not a consonant state. In a nutshell, tomorrow we'll discuss it.